The phone vibrated in the silence of the penthouse, and within seconds, a decision was made that would alter the fate of an entire airline. Marcus Ellison stood by the window on the 72nd floor, the dawn light of Atlanta reflecting against the cold glass. The city beneath him stretched like a maze of ambition, promises, and invisible boundaries he had spent a lifetime breaking through. At 49, Marcus was more than a businessman. He was a symbol of a generation, the first black man to take Helios Capital Group, one of America's leading investment firms, to a global level. Yet that morning, he wasn't thinking about numbers. He was thinking about respect. The faint click of his Patek Philippe echoed as he adjusted his cufflinks. The meeting in Chicago should have been just another deal among hundreds he had sealed before, but deep down, Marcus sensed something else was waiting for him, something no spreadsheet could measure. The phone rang again. On the screen flashed the name Kai Ellison, his only son. Kai's voice came through, rushed and edged with frustration. "Dad, they didn't listen. The idea I presented, they gave the credit to someone else. And when I spoke up, they said I was being too sensitive. What should I do?" Marcus was silent for a few seconds. His eyes drifted toward the horizon where the sun was rising, brilliant yet cold. "Son," he said slowly, "I've been there. And you know what? They will test your composure far more than your competence." Kai sighed. "So I should stay quiet?" "No," Marcus replied, his tone deepening. "You document everything. You work smarter than they do. But don't ever let them touch your dignity. Keep your calm. That's your weapon." The call ended, and silence reclaimed the room, broken only by the faint whisper of wind beyond the glass. Marcus stood there for a long moment, his son's words still echoing in his mind. Memories surfaced of nights as a college student working the late shift at a gas station, accused of theft because he fit the description. 20 years had passed since then, and he had built a multi-billion-dollar empire. Yet those same looks of doubt, suspicion, quiet condescension still followed him. He walked to his desk, where his laptop displayed his flight schedule. Helios 1, private jet, Atlanta to Chicago, 9:00 a.m. Marcus paused. The cursor blinked, waiting for his confirmation. But he simply smiled, dialing a number. He spoke calmly. "Lena, change of plans. I won't be using the jet today." His executive assistant hesitated. "Sir, are you sure? The meeting. I want to experience our new airline myself." "You mean Aerolux Airways?" "Yes. Book me a first-class ticket under my real name. No need to inform anyone." There was a brief silence on the line. "Understood, sir." Marcus ended the call, his eyes glinting with a cold, sharp clarity. He knew the numbers behind Aerolux, the revenue, the margins, the performance. But there was one metric every report failed to capture: how people treated people. He put on a charcoal suit, buttoning it with deliberate precision. In the mirror, he didn't see a powerful CEO. He saw the reflection of a man who had once been underestimated, dismissed, forced to hold his anger just to prove his worth. A faint smile crossed his lips, thin, calm, and calculated. "Sometimes," Marcus murmured to himself, "the only way to see the truth is to disappear into the crowd." He picked up his leather briefcase and walked out the door. No one in the Helios Tower knew that within hours, the man they called Mr. Ellison would become just another passenger, and the entire Aerolux system would be tested, not by profits or metrics, but by humanity. Because sometimes a flight isn't just a journey between two cities, it's a test of an entire culture. The soft crackle of morning rain tapped against the car window. The black sedan glided smoothly past the soaked trees lining the road toward Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Marcus Ellison leaned back slightly, his eyes gliding over the shifting numbers on his tablet screen, though his mind was elsewhere. Inside him was a strange feeling, as if he were about to take a test no one else knew existed. The driver, a middle-aged man in a black suit, glanced at him through the rear-view mirror. "International terminal, sir." Marcus nodded. "Domestic gate. I'm flying Aerolux." The driver hesitated, surprised. "Aerolux? I thought you only flew private." Marcus smiled faintly. "Today I want to try something ordinary." The car rolled to a stop at the departure terminal. As the door opened, cold air mixed with the sharp scent of jet fuel rushed in. He tightened his grip on the handle of his briefcase and stepped out. The airport lights reflected off the wet pavement, like hundreds of mirrors, capturing a world of hurried faces. He had walked through countless airports before, yet he could always feel that invisible gaze, the one that silently asked, "Do you really belong here?" At the security checkpoint, the line stretched long. Marcus stood among the crowd, crisp white shirt, boarding pass in hand. In front of him was a middle-aged white man in a grey suit. When it was his turn, the TSA officer glanced at the passport, smiled and said, "Have a good flight, sir." When Marcus stepped forward, the white officer, Rick Donnelly, took his passport. He looked at the photo, then at Marcus. 1 second, 2, 3. The silence between them felt heavy, broken only by the officer's dry tone. "Business trip?" "Yes, Chicago." "Step aside for additional screening." The words were calm, but the tone carried something else, as if Marcus had said something suspicious. He didn't argue, only nodded. As he removed his belt, watch, and placed his laptop on the conveyor, he could feel a few glances pass over him. No one spoke, but Marcus knew what they were thinking. They didn't see a CEO. They saw a black man being randomly checked. Inside the secondary inspection area, 2 other officers carefully searched his bag, laptop, even flipping through the pages of his notebook. One asked, "What do you do for a living?" Marcus answered calmly, "Investment." "Oh, big business?" He smiled slightly. "Big enough to buy an airline?" The officer froze, unsure if it was a joke. Marcus didn't explain. When he stepped out, tightening his belt again, a low voice came from behind. "Never gets easier, does it?" Marcus turned. It was a black man about his age, wearing a dark suit, briefcase in hand. His face looked tired, but his smile was kind. "I'm Jerome Carter," he said, offering his hand. "Headed to Detroit. Got pulled for secondary again?" Marcus shook his hand. "Chicago. Same story." The 2 men walked side by side through the busy terminal, their footsteps steady amid the flow of travelers. Jerome shook his head, his tone carrying a trace of bitterness. "I've flown this route for 3 years. Every week, they stop me. My company did a little math. White travelers take an average of 12 minutes to get from check-in to the gate. For black travelers like us, 20 till 7. Marcus smiled faintly. 15 minutes difference for every flight. And thousands of times over a lifetime, Jerome said quietly, his gaze distant. It's like an invisible tax. Marcus said nothing. That word, tax, struck something deep inside him. A kind of cost no one ever recorded, paid in exhaustion, restraint, and the familiarity of being underestimated. When they parted ways at a fork in the terminal, Marcus said, "Have a good flight." Jerome smiled weakly. "You too. Hope your airline's better than most I've flown." Marcus stopped, watching the man's figure fade into the crowd. He knew Jerome had no idea who he'd just spoken to, and perhaps that was exactly what Marcus wanted, to let the world reveal itself when no one knew power was watching. He tightened his grip on his leather briefcase. Under the pale green neon lights of the terminal, his reflection appeared on the glass, the face of a CEO about to experience what it meant to be judged not by title, but by color. This time he would not stay silent. This time, every buzz would have to change. The electronic board flickered. Aerolux Airways, Flight 4222 to Chicago, boarding 0940. Marcus gently rolled his suitcase forward, passing through the business class counter area. A navy blue carpet stretched ahead like a ribbon, leading to a sleek reception desk where a blonde woman sat upright behind a computer. Her nameplate read, Marla Quinn. Her voice was smooth and sharp, polished like glass. "Good morning, sir. You're here for first class, correct?" Marcus smiled politely, holding out his phone. "First class to Chicago, Marcus Ellison." Marla took it, her eyes gliding from the screen to his face, lingering longer than necessary. One beat, two. Then, in a tone laced with polite suspicion, she asked, "And which card did you use to book this ticket?" Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. "My personal card? Is there a problem?" "Oh no, of course not," she replied quickly, forcing a smile, though her fingers moved across the keyboard faster than usual. "It's just sometimes passengers get confused. The first-class counter is this one, not premium economy." Marcus didn't react. He simply looked at her for a moment and said, calmly but firmly, "I believe I'm exactly where I should be." The air went still for a second. Marla pressed her lips together, printed the ticket, and slid it across the counter with a half the smile. "Mr. Ellison, you're welcome to use the Aerolux Signature Lounge. After security, turn right." Marcus was about to walk away when he heard her whisper to the colleague beside her, "Doesn't look like a first-class type. Probably used points." They both chuckled softly, assuming he couldn't hear. He just stood there, looking down at the boarding pass in his hand. Once words like that would have made his face burn, would have driven him to fight back. Now, all he felt was cold, the kind of cold found in the metallic glint of eyes that decide someone's worth by skin color instead of character. He called Lena Barrett, his tone even. "Aerolux's customer experience has begun, and it's very authentic." Lena sighed. "Should I notify management?" "Not yet. Let them be themselves. I want to see the full picture." Passing through security, Marcus was again selected for a random check. The younger officer who held his ticket looked uneasy, as if searching for a justification for the repetition. Marcus only smiled. saying nothing. Inside, he recorded every detail. When he reached the lounge, a warm, golden glow spilled from within. A walnut bar, brown leather chairs, vintage airplane photos, the kind of classic luxury meant to impress. At the front desk stood a young attendant named Evan Chu, his smile ready, until he saw Marcus. "I'm sorry, sir. This lounge is for first-class passengers only." "I know," Marcus replied evenly, "and I am a first-class passenger." Evan froze, glanced quickly at the ticket, then back at Marcus as if to verify. "Ah, understood. Please, go ahead." Marcus stepped in, feeling the subtle shift of eyes turning toward him. Brief, cool, assessing. A few middle-aged men lowered their voices, murmuring to each other. A woman by the window quietly pulled her handbag closer. He chose a quiet corner seat and opened his laptop. Before he could type, a flight attendant approached, her smile polished to perfection. Paula Green, mid-40s, immaculate uniform. "Excuse me, sir. This lounge is reserved for first-class guests." Marcus looked up, calm but firm. "I know, and I am one." Paula pressed her lips together, checked the ticket, then quickly changed her tone. "Of course. My apologies. What can I get you to drink?" "Black coffee." She walked away briskly, almost as if escaping his gaze. Marcus watched her go, a mix of sadness and disappointment stirring inside. Then a voice came from beside him, deep, confident. "They always double. Check you, don't they?" Marcus turned to see a white man in an expensive suit, smiling in a practiced, social way. "Harold Whitford," he said, extending a hand. Marcus shook it. "Maybe it's because I don't look like what they expect," Marcus replied. Harold chuckled softly. "Oh, I understand. Society takes its time catching up to success." Marcus said nothing, only nodded. He had heard that line all his life. But this time, he wasn't just hearing. He was observing, taking note. He didn't know yet that in just a few hours, the very same people who looked down on him would be standing before him, trembling when they learned that the man they doubted at check-in was the one who held ultimate authority over the entire airline. And this was only the first test. The steady rhythm of airport announcements echoed through the terminal, blending with the rolling sound of luggage wheels and footsteps. Yet Marcus heard only one beat, slow, deep, and heavy inside his chest. He had spent a lifetime in a world of polished boardrooms where every word was weighed against the value of a company's stock. And yet today he stood in line like any other passenger, surrounded by people who had no idea that the man before them was the owner of the very airline they were about to fly. At gate B19, the Aerolux Airways first-class counter gleamed beneath white lights. Harold Whitford, the man who had chatted with Marcus in the lounge, stepped forward first. The attendant smiled brightly, lowering her head slightly in deference. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitford. Flying with us again. Always a pleasure to have you." Harold gave a satisfied nod, the kind that came from someone convinced the world moved in harmony with the position he believed he deserved. Then came Marcus's turn. He handed over his boarding pass calmly. "Marcus Ellison, first come worst class." Brianna Keats, the gate agent, glanced at the ticket and froze. Her brow furrowed, her eyes darting from the screen to his face, lingering longer than necessary. "First class?" she repeated flatly. "That's right," Marcus replied. "I'll need to see your ID, sir," she said. Marcus blinked. He had just watched 8 passengers before him board without being asked. I don't recall ID being required for first-class boarding. It's a supplemental verification procedure, sir, Brianna answered, trying to sound professional, though her lips tightened slightly. The line behind him began to stir. Then a woman's voice rose, cool and firm. "Excuse me, you didn't check my ID, nor anyone before me." Marcus turned to see a red-haired woman behind him, Nora Whitman, her gaze sharp as glass. "Is there a problem with his ticket?" Brianna faltered. "I'm just following procedure." "What procedure?" Nora cut in. "I've flown Aerolux over 20 times this year. There's no such procedure." The air tensed until another voice entered the scene. Olivia Hart, the flight's lead attendant, stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor. "What's going on here, Brianna?" "Just verifying information, ma'am," Brianna muttered, avoiding Marcus's eyes. Olivia turned toward him, her smile polite but practiced. "My apologies, sir. Just a minor mix-up. Please go ahead and board." Marcus looked at her in silence. There was no anger in his eyes, only observation, sharp and dissecting, like a surgeon's blade. He walked past her and onto the jet bridge, leaving behind Nora Whitman's disappointed stare. She shook her head and whispered to the person beside her. Again, and they still call it a minor mix-up. Inside the first-class cabin, the scent of new leather and wine hung in the air. Marcus paused in the aisle. Flight attendant Tina Salazar, her makeup flawless, greeted passengers with a radiant smile until she saw him. "Boarding pass?" she asked curtly, the smile fading. Marcus handed it to her. "Seat 2A, she read. "Oh, there must be some mistake. Another passenger is already seated there." He looked up. In seat 2A sat a middle-aged white man, Colin Mercer, scrolling through his iPad without even glancing up. Marcus approached politely. "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat." Colin looked up briefly, his expression carrying the weary irritation of a man who believed he was never wrong. "No, 2A is mine. I always sit at his." Marcus held out his ticket. "It seems we share the same seat number. Perhaps there's a system error." Tina stepped in, checking her tablet, then nodded. "Yes, it's a duplicate booking. But Mr. Mercer is a Platinum Elite member, so I'll arrange another seat for you, in economy, if that's all right." The air in the cabin seemed to freeze. Nearby passengers looked up, silent, watching. Marcus remained composed, his tone calm but unwavering. "I purchased a first-class ticket, and I don't believe loyalty points entitle anyone to take a paid seat." Tina forced a smile. "We're just trying to keep things smooth." "Smooth," Marcus repeated softly. "Or convenient, for the people you prefer to accommodate." Tina went quiet. A faint flush crept up her neck. Marcus glanced around the cabin, a familiar feeling returning. Not anger, but resolve. He knew this moment would not end with a single seat. It would spread like a crack across glass, and when it shattered, the world would finally see what lay beneath Aerolux's polished surface. He took a slow breath and spoke clearly. "Call the captain. I'd like to speak with him directly." Tina froze. The words were calm, but they landed like an order. In that instant, no one around knew that this composed passenger, the man they were quietly dismissing, held the ultimate authority over the airline they worked for. All they knew was that something very bad had just begun. The air inside the first-class cabin thickened, stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. Every eye turned toward seat 2A, where Marcus Ellison stood silent, while Colin Mercer sat with his arms crossed, irritation etched on his face. Flight attendant Tina Salazar clutched her tablet, tapping furiously, as if her fingers could find a way out through the screen. "I've checked, sir," she said, her voice a pitch higher. "The system lists Mr. Mercer as a platinum guest, so by priority regulation, he retains seat 2A. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his tone calm, every word dropping like a weight onto the floor. "And I, the person who paid for that seat, where do I go?" "We can move you to economy. Complimentary drinks will be provided." Marcus let out a quiet laugh, not loud, not angry, just a thin sound, sharp enough to cut the air. "Complimentary drinks for humiliation." Tina froze. A few passengers nearby began whispering, phones lifting discreetly to capture the moment. In seat 3B, Nora Whitman, the red-haired woman, leaned forward, disbelief lighting her eyes. "She's actually sending him to economy." Tina turned, flustered. "Please remain quiet. We're handling." "No, you're covering up," Nora shot back, her voice clear enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I saw him show his ticket, and I heard how you spoke to him. Don't pretend this is just a system error." A flush crept up Tina's neck. She pressed the call button, her voice tense. "I need the captain to the forward cabin, please." Seconds later, Captain Arthur Slade appeared, tall, broad, shouldered, silver-haired, eyes sharp as steel. He stepped into the aisle, his tone cold and commanding. "What's going on here?" Tina hurried to explain. "Seat 2A was double booked, Captain, but Mr. Mercer is a platinum member, so No need," Slade cut her off. He turned to Marcus, his voice firm, accustomed to authority. "Sir, we need to depart. You may take a seat in economy for now, and we'll compensate you with a travel voucher on your next flight." Marcus met his eyes, unwavering. "I don't want a voucher. I want fairness." "Sir, we have a schedule to maintain." "Then follow the correct policy," Marcus replied, enunciating each word. "I want to see Aerolux's official procedure for handling first-class duplicate bookings. If your policy specifically states that downgraded seats are reserved for passengers of color, I'll comply." The cabin rippled with tension. Whispers broke out like sarcos, catching dry leaves. Tina's face went pale. Captain Slade gripped the brim of his cap. "Are you accusing us of discrimination?" Marcus's voice stayed steady. "I'm not accusing. I'm asking. And I'm waiting for an answer." Tina interjected nervously. "Sir, we don't have that policy document available." "Then I'll call the person who does." Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing swiftly. "Sir, mobile devices must be on airplane mode," Slade snapped. "The door's still open, Captain, and I only need 1 minute to fix this mistake." He pressed the phone to his ear. "Lena, send me the Aerolux merger agreement and the document granting interim executive authority." There was a pause, then Lena's calm voice came through. "Yes, sir." Slade frowned. "Who are you?" Marcus looked at him directly, not blinking. "The man you should have greeted before giving orders." At that moment, a notification pinged. Marcus opened the email, turning the screen toward them. "I'm Marcus Ellison, CEO of Helios Capital Group, the parent company that acquired Aerolux Airways 3 months ago." Tina's mouth fell open. Slade froze, his eyes locked on the glowing text. The cabin fell into stunned silence. Colin Mercer, still in his seat, slowly removed his headphones, his face drained of color. Marcus's voice softened, calm, controlled. The voice of the man he truly was. "Now, Captain, let's have a conversation about how this airline treats its passengers." Tina stepped back, trembling. "Sir, I didn't know." "Exactly," Marcus said, his tone low yet resonant through the cabin. "No one knows. That's the problem." Every camera, every gaze turned toward him. In that moment, the man who had been told to give up his seat had flipped the entire script. He was no longer the passenger they underestimated. He was the man who owned the sky itself. The first-class cabin fell completely silent. The faint hum of the engines waiting for clearance could be heard outside, steady and distant. Marcus Ellison still stood in the aisle, phone in hand, the bright glow of the screen illuminating a face that was calm to the point of being unnerving. "Mr. Ellison," Captain Slade stammered, his voice dropping an octave. "I had no idea you would be on this flight." Marcus's lips curved faintly. "Exactly. I wanted to see how Aerolux operates when no one is watching, and you've shown me far more than I expected." Tina Salazar stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her face drained of color. Colin Mercer, the man who had insisted on keeping the seat, now looked down, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. The cabin door opened, and Sonia Patel, the ground operations director, rushed in with 2 airport security officers. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes wide with panic as she realized who stood before her. "Mr. Ellison." "My God, we had no idea you were on." Marcus cut her off, his voice deep but clear, every word slicing through the air. "No need for excuses, Ms. Patel. Just confirm something for me. Under the merger agreement, the CEO of Helios Capital Group has the authority to directly supervise and intervene in Aerolux operations during the transition period. Correct?" "Yes, sir. That authority belongs entirely to you." Marcus nodded once, then turned to Captain Slade. "Then from this moment, that authority will be exercised here. This flight is grounded." A wave of murmurs spread through the cabin. Passengers gasped, some whispering, others raising their phones to record. Captain Slade opened his mouth, his voice laced with apprehension. "Sir, that will cause chaos. Dozens of passengers." "And millions more will make noise," Marcus interrupted, "if I let this pass as a minor incident." "No, Captain. This flight will not depart. Not because of a technical issue, because of a cultural one, Mustahal." He took out his phone again, dialing. "Lena, contact Victor Lang, Aerolux's regional director. Tell him to be at gate B19 in 30 minutes. I want an emergency meeting." "Understood, sir," Lena replied, her voice carrying a note of tension. Marcus looked up, scanning the cabin, his gaze moving across every face. "Ms. Patel, inform the passengers that the flight is temporarily delayed due to internal matters. They'll receive meals and accommodations if necessary." "Yes, sir." He stepped closer to Colin Mercer, his voice steady but heavy with authority. "Mr. Mercer, the fault isn't yours. You are a product of a system that taught you to believe you were always first in line. I hope after today you'll think differently." Colin nodded, his voice barely audible. I understand. Marcus turned toward the flight crew. Tina, Olivia Hart, and Captain Slade stood frozen, their faces a mix of shame and fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, "I'm not here to punish you, but I won't protect you either. What happened today isn't an individual mistake. It's a habit that has become culture. And I will break it." The entire cabin seemed to go still, as if even the air refused to move. Moments later, Victor Lang, Aerolux's regional director, climbed aboard, moving quickly, sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked around at the silent faces, then found Marcus's eyes. "Mr. Ellison," he said hoarsely, "I was told there was an incident." "It's no longer an incident," Marcus replied. "It's a warning to all of Aerolux. Starting today, this airline changes. No more accidents, no more procedural misunderstandings. I want a training session conducted here, right now, with this entire crew." Victor blinked. "Right now, sir?" "Right now. Dr. Miriam Cho's training team will arrive in 1 hour. Until then, start preparing. We don't need to take off to rise higher." Marcus began walking down the aisle, his voice lower now, but every word carried the weight of command. "I don't want apologies. I want awareness, and I want it to begin on this flight." The cabin door closed. Through the window, midday sunlight spilled in, glinting off Marcus's grey suit, making him appear like a solitary monument in the storm he had created. A storm that would soon cleanse a decaying system. And in that moment, everyone on board understood. The flight that didn't take off today was the most important flight in the history of Aerolux. The cabin speakers came to life, the voice calm and deliberate, unlike the usual bright tone that preceded takeoff. "Dear passengers, Flight 422 to Chicago will be temporarily delayed due to internal matters. Please remain calm and await further instructions. Aerolux Airways sincerely thanks you for your understanding." The announcement faded, replaced by a wave of murmurs spreading through the cabin like ripples on water. Some passengers tikiasteed, some frowned, others raised their phones to record. But most turned their attention to the man standing in the aisle, the one they had thought was merely a difficult passenger minutes earlier. Now, Marcus Ellison stood at the center of something far greater than a delayed flight. He was at the heart of a reckoning no one had expected. Sonia Patel returned to the cabin, her breathing quick. "Mr. Ellison, I've informed the passengers. Many have agreed to disembark and wait for updates, but some still want to know what's happening." Marcus nodded. "That's fair. They deserve the truth." He turned to Captain Slade, his voice calm but firm. "Captain, you'll speak with me. You're the face of Aerolux, and today you'll also be the face of change." Slade hesitated, his jaw tightening. Perhaps there was still pride buried beneath his composure, but the look in Marcus's eyes left no room for refusal. At last he nodded. "Understood, sir." The cabin doors opened, and passengers began to file out. Marcus was the last to leave. The cold, white light of the terminal spilled in, gleaming off the polished tile floor. At gate B19, more than 30 people had gathered. Phones were raised, cameras flashing, live streams running. News spread faster than any order Helios headquarters could issue. Outside the gate, Victor Lang, Aerolux's regional director was already trying to manage a cluster of local reporters. "There's nothing serious," he said awkwardly. But his words evaporated the moment Marcus appeared. The crowd fell into stunned silence, then erupted into a flurry of whispers. "That's him? The Helios CEO, the owner of Aerolux. He actually grounded the flight." Marcus walked straight to the announcement counter, where Sonia Patel had placed a handheld microphone. He stood there, his suit perfectly pressed, his voice steady and resonant, each word striking like a gavel in a boardroom. "I am Marcus Ellison, Chief Executive Officer of Helios Capital Group, the company that owns Aerolux Airways. Today, I boarded this flight as a regular passenger to understand the service culture of the airline I just acquired. And now, I understand it perfectly." Silence fell over the terminal. The passengers who had witnessed him being asked to give up his seat now looked at him with a completely different expression. "I am not here to punish anyone," Marcus continued, "but I will not allow another passenger to feel like they don't belong here because of their skin color or appearance. This flight was grounded not for technical reasons, but for human ones, and those need to be corrected, starting today." At the back of the crowd, Nora Whitman raised her hand. "Mr. Ellison, I was there. I saw everything. If you need a statement, I'll sign whatever report you need." Marcus met her eyes and nodded. "Thank you, Nora. The voice of one person who dares to speak up has more power than 100 policies." A reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Ellison, do you intend to fire the crew involved?" Marcus answered immediately. "No. They will stay. To learn, to understand where they went wrong. Because real change doesn't come from removing people. It comes from awakening them." He paused, his tone lowering, steady and deep. "And I will remain here, personally overseeing the first session." About an hour later, inside the same first-class cabin where everything had unfolded, Dr. Miriam Cho, Helios's director of training, arrived with her team of specialists. The luxury seats had been transformed into a classroom. Captain Slade, Tina Salazar, Olivia Halt, and the entire ground staff sat in rows, facing Marcus. Afternoon light slanted through the windows, bathing the cabin in a soft gold glow. Dr. Cho began, her voice calm but piercing. "Today is not a training session. It's a mirror. Each of you will see yourselves, not through your titles, but through how you make others feel." Marcus sat in the front row, hands clasped, listening intently. Every word carried weight, not just for them, but for an entire culture that needed to change. In the corner of the cabin, a journalist's camera quietly captured the scene. The image of a CEO sitting among his staff, silently listening, soon spread across social media. And the headline began to appear everywhere. "CEO grounded his own airline to teach equality." Marcus looked out the window. Another Aerolux aircraft was rolling down the runway, lifting gracefully into the amber light of sunset. He smiled faintly. Flight 422 might not have taken off today, but from this ground, a new journey had already begun. When the 3-hour training session finally ended, the light outside had turned to a deep bronze. Inside the first-class cabin, silence settled. The heavy silence of people who had just seen themselves through an uncomfortable mirror. Dr. Miriam Cho closed her binder, her voice soft but clear. The hardest part of change is not learning something new. It's unlearning what we were certain was right. Captain Slade bowed his head, his hands clasped together. Tina Salazar quickly wiped the corner of her eyes, trying to hide the emotion that lingered there. Only hours earlier, she believed she had been following procedure. Now she understood. Sometimes procedure is nothing more than a shield that protects injustice. Marcus rose from his seat, the sound of the chair shifting, breaking the stillness, like the signal of something beginning. "Thank you, all of you," he said, his gaze sweeping slowly across the room. "But understand this. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a change that each of you will represent." No one spoke. The silence held, fragile, as if even breathing too loudly might shatter it. Marcus left the cabin and walked toward Gate B19. Outside, the terminal was calmer now, but several passengers had stayed. People who had chosen to wait rather than board another flight. They wanted to understand what had happened and why a CEO would ground his own company's flight. Victor Lang, the regional director, hurried over. "Mr. Ellison, the press is already waiting in the VIP lounge. They want an interview. Should we avoid the media?" Marcus answered with a single sentence. "No. Silence is the root of this problem. It's time to speak." The lounge was quickly transformed into an impromptu press room. The flash of cameras, the buzz of microphones, and dozens of eyes fixed on him. Marcus stepped up to the temporary podium. No notes, no script. Only truth. "This afternoon," he began, "I didn't just see a double-booked seat. I saw a system that has become too comfortable deciding who deserves more without thinking twice. And I couldn't stay silent." A reporter raised his hand. "Mr. Ellison, do you believe grounding the flight might anger shareholders? The financial losses must be significant." Marcus looked straight into the lens. If a company measures its worth only by profit and forgets the value of people, then it's already lost, even when it's winning. I'm not worried about stock prices. I'm worried about trust. Behind him, Nora Whitman, the red-haired passenger who had stood up for him, smiled quietly. Another reporter asked, "How will you deal with the flight crew involved?" Marcus's reply was firm and metallic. "No one will be fired. They will learn, and they will teach. The only punishment is seeing what they once refused to see." The answer brought the entire room to stillness. When the press conference ended, Marcus walked into the corridor, looking through the glass walls at the glowing airfield below. Out on the runways, Aerolux planes continued to take off as usual. Yet he knew that from this day forward, nothing would ever be as usual again. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena Barrett lit up the screen. "Mr. Ellison, your speech has gone viral. Hashtags #CEO, grounded, and #fly with respect are trending nationwide." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. But I don't want trends. I want commitment." He opened the internal communication line, his voice calm but decisive as it carried through the operations room. "Effective immediately, every Aerolux flight will review its first and business class passenger service procedures. I want detailed, evidence-based reports on how passengers are treated at every point of contact. Start tomorrow morning." Victor Lang's voice came through. "Understood, sir." Marcus looked down at the cold cup of coffee on the table, his thoughts drifting. Perhaps real change doesn't begin with policy, but with the moment someone dares to say, enough. That night, across every news outlet and social platform, a headline spread like wildfire. Black CEO grounds his own airline after experiencing discrimination on board. The accompanying photo showed him standing by the window, a plane still idle behind him, and in his eyes, a fire that no one could extinguish. A man who made the world stop, just to remind it how to treat each other like human beings. 2 days later, the headquarters of Helios Capital Group in downtown Atlanta gleamed like a massive block of glass under the morning sun. News of Marcus Ellison grounding his own airline still dominated every major headline. Social media had already named it the flight that changed everything. But inside the 60-story boardroom, there were no cheers, no applause, only the uneasy silence of executives waiting to see how their CEO would respond. Victor Lang spoke first, cautious and measured. Mr. Ellison, following the incident, Aerolux temporarily lost approximately $4.8 million due to refunds and delay compensations. However, he paused, switching the slide. Ticket rebookings have increased by 18% within 48 hours, and positive public feedback is up tenfold across all platforms. Marcus sat with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. Because trust, he said, is the only currency you can't print more of. A company that can correct its mistakes is always stronger than one that hides them. Across the table, Dr. Miriam Cho added, "We completed the first emergency training with the Flight 4222 crew. The results are encouraging. I recommend expanding it into a mandatory company-wide program for all employees, from ground staff to pilots." Marcus nodded. "Do it, and call it the Reynolds Protocol." He paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "No, I don't want my name on it. Call it the Equity Flight Program." That afternoon, as the meeting ended, Marcus stood alone by the panoramic glass wall overlooking the runways in the distance. From the 60th floor, the planes below looked like toys, but he knew each one carried a question the world was now asking. Was this change real, or just good publicity? The door opened softly. Lena Barrett stepped in, tablet in hand. "Mr. Ellison, CNN wants a live interview tonight. CNBC also invited you to speak at the Aviation Industry Conference next week." Marcus shook his head lightly. "No need for more words. I want actions to speak." He glanced at his watch. "It's time to go back to the airport." At Gate B19, the place where everything had begun, the atmosphere was different. Aerolux staff stood in perfect formation, uniforms crisp, their demeanor focused and professional. They knew he was coming. No one spoke loudly. No one looked away, but there was determination in their eyes. Captain Slade, the man who once argued with Marcus, stepped forward. His face was solemn but composed. "Mr. Ellison, I've completed the extended training program. I want to apologize for what happened, and thank you for not firing us." Marcus shook his hand firmly, his gaze steady. "Thank you for returning. Admitting a mistake is the first step. Passing that lesson forward is the real goal." Another voice came from behind, Olivia Halt, the lead flight attendant, holding a thick binder. "Mr. Ellison, we just finished developing the new training module based on Flight 422. I'd like you to review it." Marcus took it, scanning a few lines. On the first page was a single bold sentence. "No flight is safe if passengers are not treated with fairness." He nodded. "Keep that line. It will become Aerolux's global message." 3 weeks later, the Equity Flight program officially launched across the entire network. Every passenger booking a ticket now received a new message. "We promise to respect you as a person before serving you as a customer." Other airlines began to take notice. Skybridge Airlines announced they were studying the Helios model. The FAA convened a special session to discuss behavioral training protocols in commercial aviation. A ripple of change was spreading beyond a single airline. On television, a viral clip showed Marcus sitting among staff in a training room, not in a suit, but in a white shirt, taking notes like any other student. The image moved millions. A CEO not standing at the podium, but sitting in the classroom, learning respect alongside everyone else. That evening, in his Helios office, Marcus received a message from his son, Kai. "Dad, my company just launched an internal bias awareness program. They're calling it the Helios effect. You've started a movement." Marcus read the message, a quiet smile softening his face. Outside, night had fallen over Atlanta, the city glowing like scattered stars. He thought of the Aerolux planes taxiing into the dark sky. They might not have changed the world yet, but at least they were now taking off with fairness. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt he was leading not just an airline, but a movement of humanity across the skies. 1 month after that fateful day, the headquarters of Aerolux Airways looked entirely different. Along the glass corridor leading to the executive wing, the glossy posters flaunting first-class luxury had been replaced by a new slogan: "Respect flies first." Respect was now the highest class of service. Marcus Ellison entered the main conference room, where dozens of senior executives were already seated. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a glow across the screen that displayed the latest figures: revenue up, complaints down, and customer satisfaction at its highest level since the airline's founding. "We did it," Victor Lang said, unable to hide his excitement. Since launching the Equity Flight program, returning customer rates have increased by 27%, and there are over 300,000 positive posts mentioning Aerolux. Competitors are already trying to copy our model. Marcus was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "That's good. But don't get comfortable. Respect isn't a campaign, it's a commitment, and it can disappear the moment we forget why we began." Beside him, Dr. Miriam Cho opened her training report. "Captain Slade has returned to duty as a lead instructor. Olivia Hart is now heading the global training development team. They've truly changed, sir." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. There's no redemption more powerful than teaching others how to avoid the mistakes you once made." After the meeting, Marcus stepped onto the balcony overlooking the vast airport grounds below. Aerolux planes rolled one by one toward the runways. The old logo was gone, replaced with a new emblem: 2 interlocked wings, one white, one black, symbolizing unity. In the center were the words, "Equity in every journey." The door behind him opened softly. A familiar voice spoke. "Mr. Ellison, the passengers for today's special flight have arrived." Marcus turned to see Nora Whitman, Colin Mercer, and Captain Slade, the people who had shared the experience of Flight 422, walking in. They hadn't come to apologize, but to complete something left unfinished. "Here we are again," Nora said with a gentle, warm smile. "This time, I hope no one has to give up their seat." Marcus chuckled softly. "No. Today everyone has a place, and everyone deserves it." Together they boarded the first Aerolux flight since the airline's full transformation. No reporters, no ceremonies, just a real flight where every passenger was treated equally. When Marcus stepped into the cabin, a young flight attendant greeted him with a natural smile, not because she knew who he was. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Ellison. Thank you for flying with Aerolux." She bowed lightly, no deeper than for anyone else, without trying to seem extra polite. And that very normal gesture filled Marcus with quiet warmth. He sat down in seat 2A, the seat that had once been the center of a storm, now just an ordinary seat. But for him, it symbolized a turning point. In the row behind him, Colin Mercer helped an elderly passenger store their luggage. Nora sat by the window, smiling as she watched the crew serve everyone equally, without distinction. As the plane began to taxi, Captain Slade's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Arthur Slade. Our journey today is not just from Atlanta to Chicago. It is a journey of trust, of change, and of respect." The cabin fell silent. People exchanged glances, saying nothing, yet all feeling something shift quietly within. Marcus tilted his head, looking out the window. The runway lights lined up like a river of stars. The engines roared steadily, powerfully. The plane lifted off the ground. But this time, it wasn't just Aerolux that took flight. It was the faith of millions who had once felt small. When the plane landed in Chicago, the entire crew stood at the door to thank each passenger. No one knew who the CEO was. No one needed to. They simply bowed and smiled with sincerity. Marcus was the last to leave. At the exit, Captain Slade approached and handed him a small metal plaque. "We mounted this on seat 2A, he said, "to remind everyone." Marcus looked down. It read, "On this seat, equality took flight." He ran his fingers over the engraving, his eyes glinting with emotion he didn't bother to hide. That afternoon, at the small restaurant where he often met his son, Kai Ellison spoke with excitement. "Dad, my company just announced a new diversity initiative. They said it was inspired by Aerolux." Marcus laughed. "Good. But don't stop at inspiration, Kai. Turn it into culture." His son nodded, eyes shining. "You know, Dad, sometimes all it takes is one person to stand up, and the whole world sits down to listen." Marcus stayed quiet, looking at his son. And in that young man's eyes, he saw himself 20 years ago. Outside, the sky had turned violet, reflected through the window glass. He raised his glass and said softly, "And sometimes, to rise higher, we have to be willing to stop." They clinked glasses, smiling in silence. Beyond the window, an Aerolux plane bearing the new emblem soared across the sunset, not the flight that was grounded, but the first flight of a new era of equality. When the story of Flight 422 came to an end, the world of aviation had changed. But more than that, the way people saw one another had changed too. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to pause within the machinery of power to make an entire system look in the mirror. The story of Marcus Ellison is not just a lesson in leadership. It is a reminder that true power does not lie in the ability to command, but in the courage to say no to what is wrong, even when that choice slows down the entire world. He could have flown on his private jet, free from inconvenience, untouched by bias. But he chose seat 2A to listen, to witness, and to transform. From one duplicated seat, he sparked a movement. And if there is one thing we can learn from Marcus, it is that respect is not a privilege. It is the starting point. If this story moved you, leave a like to share the message that fairness is never a luxury. Subscribe so you don't miss the next journeys, where ordinary people teach us extraordinary lessons about dignity and courage. And if you believe this world can still change through respect, comment 3 words: dignity takes flight. Because sometimes a single seat and one person brave enough to stand up can change the entire sky.